The year was 1815. Cincinnati, having just been founded a couple years prior, was still a young, small, yet ever-growing city, fed by the Ohio River and its many tributaries. Of the rivers that poured into the Ohio was the Great Miami, which ran to a small camp that would soon become Miamitown. Flatboats would transport supplies back and forth between the two cities, arming the camp, keeping it fed, the forest being dense cover for the violent Native American tribes which spread throughout the fields of trees like tares amongst the wheat. Up until the 1800s, the colonists were slow to progress as the Indians defended their territory with brutality, striving to outwit greater weaponry with more endearing tactics. It wasn't long before rumors began to spread of creatures that had the bodies of horses and the torsos of men, centaurs that protected a steep, vast hill that was as a mountain. This place would be known as Buffalo Ridge, named after the buffalo, which were scarcely scattered amongst the forest, though some can dispute that there was no buffalo locally, buffalo tending to avoid hilly forest because vegetation is more sparse. This left the legend of such creatures like centaurs to hold stake in the area as such an explanation for what these people really encountered. By 1968, much had changed. The Indians long gone, roads paved, and a lot of land for sale. The Mitchells were turning their property into a park and moving out after much controversy had surrounded the recent murders of a servant and family in a manor which sat across from the Mitchells' property, across Buffalo Ridge Road. Mitchell lived on Zion Road and knew of the legend which surrounded the crematorium, which sat not far past Zion Road, further up Buffalo Ridge, also across from the Mitchell property. Stone remains are the relics of these mysterious occultist crematoriums. There was no church in the area, the Indians didn't burn their dead, and the legend was the centaurs would burn sacrifices to maintain their energy, consuming the released spirit of their unfortunate victim. Back to Grandview Manor and the House of Feathers. 1940. Young philanthropist by the name of James Grandview had purchased a giant plot of land across from the Mitchell residence. Grandview's property was on the side of the hill, hard to build on and far less adequate for commercial prospects, whereas the Mitchell property was on the top of the hill, a real estate mogul's dream, which Grandview very much was indeed. There always seemed to be a tension between Grandview and Mitchell, who seldom looked each other's way or even spoke. Nonetheless, by 1950, Grandview had erected a beautiful mansion for his family and built a tower for his servant that would become known as the House of Feathers. For the servant, Eleanor had a lust to keep birds and make pillows with the feathers. Grandview was married to Marionette. They had a son, Jim, and a daughter, Maria. The forest so dense on the property that for 10 years Maria and Jim feared venturing into it. At any given time, the noises and shadowy figures often keeping them trapped inside. One day in 1965, that all changed. Maria, older, 15 now, and Jim, 13, had ventured into the woods. One seemingly calm, beautiful, sunny afternoon. Jim ran deep into the woods, heading from their house towards Zion Road on the Grandview side, when he stumbled across a stone building with smoke pouring out the chimney. He began approaching the front of the stone building, not knowing they had any neighbors besides Mitchell. A beast with the body of a horse charges at Jim, chanting. Jim runs. By this time, his sister is approaching the building when she sees Jim running and hears chanting. Frozen in fear, she stands unable to move as Jim runs back to the property, at least a mile down the road. Jim makes it a good distance, and he can see the house when he hears his sister scream. Jim starts crying,
knowing he is no longer being chased as he approaches the door of his home. All the while, the servant had heard the scream and went running to grab James, who was in his study reviewing land surveys, deciding on future investments. James grabs his shotgun and sees Jim crying, so he yells,
"Where, Jim? Where were you guys?"
Jim turns pale for a second, and then he starts leading the way, talking about seeing the half-man, half-horse as they travel the 15-minute journey through the woods. By the time they get to the stone building, the smoke has died down. No centaurs. James approaches the entryway, and there on the stone furnace was Maria's headband. James immediately begins thinking the most logical thing, that Mitchell, who owned horses, had burned his daughter in the makeshift crematorium. Contacting the local authorities, who conducted an investigation and turned up nothing, Mitchell, having an alibi at the time, was not suspected by anyone besides James. A couple weeks had gone by, and Jim refused to leave the house now, completely terrified, surrounded by woods that seemed to be closing in as the days and nights seemed darker with Maria gone. James, mad and unable to accept Mitchell was innocent, decided he would blow up the crematorium to stop anyone from killing there again. He ventured out into the forest around 8 p.m. after him and his wife ate dinner and put Jim to bed.
His wife decided to stay with Eleanor in the House of Feathers and help her make pillows. Carrying with him, James had his shotgun and 3 sticks of TNT. He makes it to the crematorium, lights a stick of dynamite, and tosses it on the roof. 12 seconds later, boom. He tosses another lit stick, and boom. He is just about to light the 3rd stick when he hears hoofbeats. James drops the stick of dynamite and matches, unable to light it, quickly reaching for his shotgun. James shoots a shot as a tomahawk splits his forehead. Jim wakes up screaming, and the ladies run from the servant's house to comfort him. About 1 minute later, they hear hoofbeats and chanting. Eleanor panics and runs to the House of Feathers, fearing for the safety of her birds, as an explosion follows behind her, the centaur having used the dynamite to destroy the manor. Eleanor starts madly releasing her birds, feathers flying everywhere through the air as hoofbeats and chanting makes its way to her door. Eleanor is found the next day as authorities come to investigate the explosions. She had been scalped, her pillows torn open, and she was covered in feathers. No one really knows what happened. It was so tragic that the manor and House of Feathers were excavated away, and the story was covered up in time, as the Mitchells turned their property into a park shortly after, and all that remains is a stone shell of what used to be a crematorium on the Grandview side of Buffalo Ridge.